A simple trip to purchase a charger for my phone was planned. It was meant to be something normal and routine. What was waiting for me in the parking lot, on the other hand, would scare me for months. I never thought that my night at Crescent Mall would turn into a terrible dream. It was a cool and crisp fall evening, and the city was just starting to become quiet for the night. I chose to go to the closed Crescent Mall for a brief visit. The shop was only a short walk away, and I needed a new phone charger. I only meant to stay long enough to acquire what I needed and then go home. Even though it was after 8:30 p.m., the mall wasn't crowded. There were still enough people there to make it feel calm and comfortable. Overhead, the fluorescent lights flickered and the quiet hum of the air conditioner mixed with the sound of people speaking far away. It always felt like the mall was busy, but not too awful. I went through the electronics area and found the charger I needed. Then I took a moment to look at the new items. Everything looked fine. Sounds of the evening. People talking and moving around, the sound of store doors opening and closing, and soft statements over the speakers. There was nothing strange. It took me about 20 minutes to arrive at the pay station. I paid for my things at the self-checkout machine, scanned them, and then left the store. It looked like everything was fine until I went outside. Something didn't feel right as soon as I walked out of the folding doors. Near the door, there was a man in his early 50s who was pushing a nearly empty shopping cart while leaning heavily on his legs. At first, his look didn't scare me. He had messy hair that fell just past his shoulders, and he was wearing an old jacket. He looked like he might be having a difficult time with an injury, and for a moment I felt sorry for him. To get my attention, he waved at me. He spoke softly but clearly. "Excuse me, could you help me put my groceries in the car?" I didn't think twice. It seemed like a harmless request at the time, so I agreed without giving it much thought. In any case, the man was on crutches and his cart only had a few bags. What harm could it do? I went over, grabbed the cart, and walked after him as he hobbled forward slowly. He thanked me and said it was hard for him to move around because his leg was hurt. I didn't think much of the fact that he spoke a little slurred. He said that his car was parked a little farther down the path. I saw something strange as we walked along the side of the building. The man led me down a narrow, poorly lit path that I hadn't even known existed, not toward the main parking lot. As we walked, the area became more peaceful, and the mall's bright lights dimmed behind us. My stomach got tight. It didn't seem right. The man said, "Just a little further," but it was hard to hear him. Since the first time he asked, the man hadn't said much, and I felt a deep sense of dread. I took a quick look. The sun went down as we walked farther. There seemed to be a lot of dark around me. He was on crutches, so why did he park so far away? It didn't seem right. But I pushed the cart on anyway, trying to get rid of the feeling that something wasn't right. We finally got to the back of the mall, which was empty and quiet, with just a few delivery trucks stopped in spots that weren't normally used. A black SUV near the loading dock was the only car that could be seen. Its headlights were off, so it was difficult to see. I paused because I had many questions, but the man wouldn't stop. He kept walking forward, moving slowly but deliberately. His voice had dropped to almost a growl as he said, "Just put the bags in the back." As I got closer to the back of the SUV, I put the bags inside. Now my nerves were tense. The parking lot seemed like a long time ago, and the mall's lights were difficult to see. The man's tone changed all of a sudden. "Get in," he told them, and all of a sudden his voice turned cold and scary. I blinked in surprise. "What?" My voice was shaking as I asked. He said it again, but this time it was stronger. "Get in the car. Let's take a ride." My heart stopped. There were many urges in my body to run, but I was still. His face looked entirely different now. What started out as a simple ask had turned into a terrifying demand. "No," I whispered, but my voice was shaking. I heard a door open at that moment. Someone else got out of the SUV with a scary grin on his face. My heart stopped beating. It wasn't a gift. This request wasn't a favorable one. It was a trick. I turned around and saw the man on crutches. It was hard for him to walk when I first saw him. But now, out of the blue, he dropped one of his crutches and stood up straight fine. It was a lie that they were hurt. My thoughts were going fast as I tried to decide what to do. I ran away without thinking. I turned around and ran as fast as I could. I could hear my footsteps echoing behind me. I didn't dare look back as they yelled after me. I ran quickly to the farthest end of the property, where a chain-link fence marked the edge of the mall's lot. My breath came out in short gasps. The men were getting closer, and their steps were getting louder. When I reached the fence, I jumped over it, grasped the top, and propelled myself to the other side. It hurt when my hands hit the metal, but I didn't care. I had to leave that place. When I hit the ground on the other side, I stumbled, but I didn't stop running. I ran quickly across the small patch of grass, my heart beating fast until I got to the other side of the path. I took a look back. The men stood at the fence and looked at me with cold, calculated eyes. I grabbed my phone and called the cops. As I talked about what had happened, I tried to catch my breath. I met them at the front of the mall when the police quickly arrived. The back lot was searched, but the SUV and the guys were not there. I didn't hear anything else from the cops about my report. I do not know if they were ever caught. However, I am aware that I nearly suffered a much more serious injury that night. The night shift began with the soft hum of the register and the sound of scanning items. But I had no idea that when the man walked into the store, my normal evening would turn into a scary event that would change my life forever. When I got to work at Evergreen Grocery, a small but well-known store in our town, it was a cold, late winter night. Since I had worked there for over 6 months, I knew everything by heart. There were only a few people shopping late at night, but they only needed a few things before going home. Checking out customers and putting things on the shelves was going to be a relaxing, quiet evening. The store was almost empty by 11 p.m. A few customers came and went while I worked the register and scanned things. The store's bright lights buzzed above me, and the only sound I could hear was the rustling of shopping carts from time to time. I thought the night would be straightforward and nothing would happen. Thereafter, he came in. At first, I didn't even notice him. He was just another customer coming in to get a few things before the shop closed. He was tall and in his early 40s. His hair was messy and he wore a long, dark coat. His eyes looked over the shelves like he wasn't sure what he was looking for as he moved slowly. But I got a strange chill as he walked by the register. His eyes met mine for a split second, but it seemed like time stood still. "Good evening," I said with a fake smile as he walked by. He gave a short nod but didn't say anything else. At first I didn't think much of it, but the way he walked and the way his eyes kept coming back to me made my skin crawl. While the night went on, I started to notice something that didn't feel right. The man wasn't gone. He was still here, walking around the store and going from one area to another. At first, I told myself I was making things worse than they were. Indeed, the store was vast, frequently causing confusion among shoppers. After a while, though, I noticed that he wasn't really shopping. He stood there for a while, looking at me. He looked at me every time I looked up from the register. He wasn't looking at the things that were on the shelves. He wasn't getting anything. He did nothing but stand there and look at me like a hunter watching its game. Even when I turned my back on him, I could feel his eyes on me. I tried to concentrate on my work, but I couldn't keep my mind off of him. He finally walked up to the counter after what seemed like forever. It made my heart skip a beat when he put one water bottle on the belt. I tried not to be weird. "Is that all for tonight?" I kept my voice steady and asked. He gave me a nod, but his eyes never left mine. "You have to work late tonight," he said in a strangely calm voice. As I looked at the water bottle, I couldn't help but feel uncomfortable. "Yeah, I'm just finishing up," I said in a casual voice. But I knew something wasn't right inside. I snatched up his thing quickly so he could get going as soon as possible. He didn't take the bag right away when I gave it to him, though. He did nothing but stare at me. "I've seen you here before," he said slowly as his voice dropped. "I know when you're busy." My heart stopped beating. My mouth dried out. I forced a weak smile and said, "I'm sorry, I don't think I remember you." But I was scared on the inside. How did he know what I had planned? He didn't answer right away. Instead, he leaned in a little, putting his face right next to mine. He said in a whisper, "I know when you're by yourself." His breath felt cold against my skin. I went cold. My heart was racing and a wave of fear went through me. The urge to scream and run was too strong for me. My thoughts were going fast as I tried to decide what to do. Was he making threats? Was he going to hurt me? Before I could say anything, he took a step back, smiled in a way that made me feel cold, and turned to leave. He said, "Good night," and his voice sounded strangely charming. I looked away, but his eyes were still on me. That man's look burned into the back of my head even as he walked away. I stood there frozen with fear for a moment before quickly locking the front door and setting off the alarm. I had the strong feeling that something awful was about to happen because my hands were shaking. I made up my mind to not wait any longer. I called my boss and told him about the man. I told him that he had been watching me and making me feel awful. My boss told me he would be there soon to check the cams and make sure everything was okay. But I was getting more and more worried as the time went on. A long time went by and the store was eerily quiet. I kept looking at the door because I thought the man might come back. My stomach turned with worry. I knew I could not keep going by myself. When my manager finally got there, we looked at the security video. What we saw shocked me. The man had been following me around the store for more than an hour, waiting until almost no one else was there before coming up to me at the counter. Now it was clear that the event wasn't a mistake. He kept up with me and watched me, waiting for the right time to move. People called the cops, but the man was already gone by the time they got there. He wasn't to be found anywhere. The police looked in the parking lot and the places around it, but he wasn't there. I still can't get rid of the thought that I almost died that night because of something much worse. What would have happened if I hadn't locked the door in time or if my boss hadn't come to check on me? I still don't know. Even though I still work at Evergreen Grocery, I always keep a close eye on the cams in case something goes wrong. At my apartment building, it was quiet at night. The only sounds were the hum of the fridge and the noise of traffic far away. But in the middle of the night, a man announced he had a delivery at my door, disrupting the tranquility. What was the worst part? I didn't place an order. When the night at Maple Heights Apartments was like any other. The moon was low in the sky and gave the empty parking lot a soft glow. I just got home from a long day at work and was excited for a quiet night in. My small but cozy apartment was tucked away on the second floor. I had done what I always did, watched Netflix for a few hours, then went to sleep. I was just getting ready for bed at 11:30 p.m. when I heard a knock on the door. It seemed like a neighbor at first, maybe someone who needed a quick favor. But when I looked through the hole in the wall, my heart skipped a beat. A man was standing outside my door with his hands empty and his face partially hidden by his jacket hood. I didn't know who he was and didn't recognize him. I thought for a moment that maybe I had missed something, like a package I had ordered. I hadn't bought anything new, though. I looked at the time one more time. It was almost midnight. What company was sending packages so late? I carefully opened the door while leaving the chain lock in place. The man looked up, but his face was blank. He said, "Good evening," but his voice was low and a little difficult to hear. "I need to bring you something." I made a face. It made me feel uneasy as I said, "I didn't order anything." "Are you sure it's for me?" In his nod, his eyes were almost on mine. "It's for apartment 204, he said in a voice that was far away and almost automatic. "Please let me in. Sign it for me." I turned my head away. "I don't think anything will happen. I'm sorry, but I can't take any more orders right now." If I tried to close the door all the way, the man's hand shot out and stopped it. "It's important," he urged, his voice getting tense. "This needs to get to you. Just sign and I'll leave." Since he wouldn't give up, I felt tense and the hairs on the back of my neck stood up. I didn't understand why I felt awful about this, but I did. There was a problem. I was about to ask him to go when I heard heavy footsteps behind him coming up the hall. I quickly looked over his shoulder and didn't see anything. Still, the unease got stronger in my chest. "Who is that?" I tried to keep my voice calm as I asked, even though I was feeling scared. The man didn't answer. He stood there with his hand firmly on the door and his eyes still not meeting mine. I could feel his hand on the door and I wasn't sure if I could close it fast enough. More footsteps could be heard, and then another guy wearing a similar jacket showed up. He did not talk. He did nothing but stand there and look at me with cold eyes. It made my heart race when I realized I was now facing two strangers in the middle of the night. Neither of them had a good reason for being here. My heart beat faster. "Who are you? What do you need?" The man who was stopping the door finally spoke again, but this time he was more demanding. "Please let us in. We're not here to make trouble. You only need to sign for the package." I felt like something snapped inside me. I was scared now. I wasn't sure what they wanted, but I wasn't going to let them into my flat. As I attempted to close the door, my voice shook when I said no. But before I could, the man's hand shot out again and pushed the door open. And then he yelled, "Let us in." His voice was no longer calm. It had changed to something darker. When the other man stepped forward, I knew I only had a few seconds before they pushed their way in. I felt a rush of panic. I felt like I could freeze, and all I could think about was running away. I slammed the door really hard in the hopes that it would stop them. But the sound I heard was not that of a door being locked, but of something heavy slamming into it from the other side. With a jolt, I took a step back. What was going on? The men gave the impression that they had no plans to leave. I heard a loud crash all of a sudden. They began to try to break the door down. I quickly moved away from the door and ran to the closest window. I threw it open so I could scream for help, but there was no one around and the parking lot was empty. Now their steps were hitting the door with even more force, which I could hear. One loud bang shook the flat, and then someone spoke from behind the door. The man said in a low, frightening voice, "We'll be back. You can't hide for a long time." I grabbed my phone and called 911 with shaking hands. The operator replied almost right away. "Call 911, what's the matter?" I was so scared that I could hardly speak. "There are 2 men trying to break in outside my door." The operator told me that someone would be there soon to help. I hung up the phone, but I was afraid to leave my room. When someone hit my apartment door, I ran to the bathroom, locked the door, and sat on the floor, shaking. It felt like hours, not minutes. There was no sound coming from the hall. I finally heard the sirens, and I was brave enough to look out the bathroom window. The cops showed up. By the time the cops reached my floor, the men had already left. They looked all over the building and the parking lot, but couldn't find them. There they were again, but not there. The police asked me if I could clearly see their faces, but I was too scared to think about anything else but getting away. I only knew I had seen 2 guys trying to get into my apartment, but I couldn't say much else. The cops told me to spend some time with a friend and said they would keep an eye on the building. I never saw those men again, but my heart skips a beat every time someone knocks on my door at night. I can't help but think, what if they wanted more than just a package? What if they were following me the whole time? I never thought I would experience a fear so real that it still haunts me when I signed up to work the night shift at Blue Ridge Diner. It turned into a nightmare while I was working alone in a quiet town. Even at this moment, I remain uncertain whether the entity observing me from the shadows was a human being. At Blue Ridge Diner, I was in the middle of my night shift and the clock had just hit 11 o'clock. Small and cozy, it was on the edge of our sleepy town and was known for its fried fries and 24-hour service. Usually the late shifts went smoothly. Sometimes a truck driver would stop for a meal. Sometimes locals would get coffee after a long day. And sometimes 1 or 2 groups of tourists would arrive late at night. Not very interesting. But tonight something wasn't right. It was quieter than usual in the diner. Just 1 car was stopped in the lot and it was at the very end. I thought it was a trucker. After a few hours of quiet work, I was ready to go home. I wasn't expecting to be in a hurry. But as I cleaned the counter, I had a terrible feeling that something wasn't right. You know, someone is watching you even though you can't see them. The sudden jingle of the doorbell interrupted the low hum of the freezers and the soft clink of silverware. Surprised, I looked up. A tall man stood in the doorway. His jacket seemed too big on him, and his wide-brimmed hat cast a shadow over his face. His clothes were dark, almost too dark for the diner, which was warm inside. He said, "Good evening," in a low, rough voice. I smiled politely, but I could feel a chill in the air right away. Even though the heat was on, the diner was cold. I told myself it was nothing, just another tourist coming in late at night. I asked, "How can I help you tonight?" He wasn't quick to answer. He did nothing but stand there and look around the diner as if he were judging it. He slowly made his way to the bar and slid into a booth in the corner after what seemed like forever. He didn't take off his coat, nor did he remove his hat. I didn't feel safe, but I didn't want to be rude. I got a menu and went over to his table. "What can I get you?" I tried to keep my voice steady as I asked again. When he talked, the man didn't look at me. He was looking straight ahead at the space in front of him. "Please have a coffee," he said in a low voice. I quickly went to the kitchen and said, "Sure." It felt even colder outside as I poured the coffee. Fear gripped me as I looked at the diner's back door, the one that went to the alley behind the building. In the dark outside, I thought I saw something move. I shook my head to get rid of the feeling. Most likely it was just a lost cat or the wind. I brought the man his coffee and put it on the table in front of him. I couldn't help but notice that his hands were shaking when I put the cup down. It wasn't a light tremble. It was a strong shaking that made him feel like he was freezing. "Are you all right?" I asked out of worry. He didn't answer right away. A small smile spread across his face, but it didn't seem to reach his eyes. He just nodded. He finally put the cup to his lips and said, "I'm fine." Even though I turned back to the bar, I couldn't help but look over at him. Something was wrong. He didn't drink the coffee. He did nothing but look at it. Even the hairs on the back of my neck stood up. I could feel my heart beating fast in my chest. I tried to look at the quiet, empty side of the diner where I was sitting. However, I was always aware that someone was watching me no matter how hard I tried. All of a sudden, the bell above the door rang again. When I quickly turned around, I thought I saw another customer, but no one was there. The door was still open, and the wind was making it swing a little. I quickly looked back at the man in the booth. He was now staring at me with a fierce, unwavering stare. It was like he had lost his smile and his face had turned cold. As I walked slowly toward him, I tried to avoid the feeling of fear that was building up in my chest. "Sir, is everything okay?" His eyes never left mine as he told me, "Check the back door." I went cold. My heart stopped beating. "What?" My voice was barely heard as I whispered, "The back door. There's someone there." I felt a knot in my stomach. I thought I had already locked it, but something told me to pay attention to him. I tried to keep things under control by nodding. I tried to sound cool when I said, "I'll be right back," even though I really wanted to leave the diner. My steps echoed through the quiet room as I made my way to the back door. It took me a moment to decide to look out the small window when I finally got there. No one was there. There was only an empty alley and the faint sound of traffic far away. I let out a sigh of relief and turned to go back inside. But then I saw something. A shadowy figure standing by the corner of the building. It didn't move. It did nothing but stand there and watch. With a fast beating heart, I quickly shut the door and pulled the blinds down tight. I quickly went back to the bar, but the man was no longer in the booth when I looked there. His coat and hat were still on, and his coffee was still there. The doorbell rang once more. I quickly turned around, but there was no one there when I looked up. I had just started a new job as a night auditor at the Riverstone Motel. I thought it would be easy and low-key. I quickly learned that some places aren't as quiet as they seem, and that not all people are as welcoming as they seem the first night I worked alone. I worked the night shift at Riverstone Motel for the first time that night. It was tucked away on the edge of town, a run-down spot that truckers and tired tourists liked. The light sign far away flickered, giving the small parking lot a dim glow. The job was excellent because it paid well and gave me plenty of time to study during the midnight shift. I had just moved into town. It looked pretty easy. When I got there that night, the boss quickly went into the back office to do something else, leaving me at the front desk by myself. The motel was very hushed. A few cars were parked in front, but the inside wasn't very busy. Nobody did anything during the first few hours. After taking care of a few calls and checking in a few guests, I got back to my normal routine. I saw something strange around 2 a.m. It spooked and briefly lost its power, but the lights in the parking lot turned back on. I didn't think much of it. There were always power outages, especially in older places like this one. But when I looked out the window, I saw a man standing on the edge of the parking lot. He stood tall, clad in a heavy coat, his face often obscured by the darkness. He stood there still and stared at the motel with his back straight. I tried not to pay attention to him by telling myself that he was just another late-night friend or someone who had stopped to rest. I went back to my work, but I couldn't get rid of the thought that someone was watching me. I looked out the window every once in a while and saw that the man was still there, looking and not moving. There were a few empty rooms at the hotel, so I thought he might have been a guest. But the way he stood there, completely still, made me feel uneasy. I tried to pay attention to my work, but my eyes kept going to the window. At 3:15 a.m., I saw a car pull up to the front door. The car parked right outside and the headlights flashed. A man and a woman got out of the car. They both looked a little messy, like they had been driving for hours. The man walked up to the desk and said, "Hi, I'm checking in. Room 7 is where we are." Though my fears were getting the best of me, I smiled and said, "Sure, I just need your ID." After I gave him the key, he and his friend walked down the hall to their room. I thought I saw the tall man in the parking lot again as they went out of sight. He was still looking. He wasn't moving at all, and I thought he was looking right at me. It made my stomach hurt. Then why was he still there? There were a few minutes of silence before I felt a strong sense of dread. Even though the man was gone, I still had a terrible feeling that something was wrong. Then I heard the tiniest sound, a low tap, tap, tap on the front desk glass window. I turned to my computer to take my mind off of things. I went cold. I'd rather not go around. Whatever it was, I didn't want to face it. It took me a while to get the courage to look. The same tall man was standing outside the window. The weak light from the parking lot illuminated part of his face. The way he looked at me was still the same, but there was something new in his eyes. When he smiled, I could feel the blood leaving my face. It wasn't a flattering smile, though. It was the kind of smile that made me want to run all over again. I moved away from the desk because I couldn't breathe. Why was he there? Why did he look at me that way? I quickly picked up the phone and called the boss, hoping that someone would answer. The phone rang a few times before going to voicemail. "Hi, my name is Kevin. After the beep, leave a message." When the beep went off, I quickly hung up. I'd rather not leave a message. I needed help right away. When I quickly looked back out the window, I saw that the man was now standing right outside the door, which scared me. He still had that creepy smile on his face as his hand rested on the glass. It felt like he was staring right into me with his eyes closed. Going to the back office to lock myself in, I grabbed my keys and walked there. I was about to leave, though, when I heard a soft knock on the front door. My heart was racing as I turned. Without moving, the man stood there with his hands on the glass. I couldn't let him in because I didn't know what he wanted or what he was going to do. I rushed to the office, locked the door, and called the cops before I could think. As I told them about the man outside, my hands were shaking. They assured me they would send someone immediately, but it felt like a considerable amount of time passed before I heard the alarms. When the police arrived, they looked around and couldn't find the man. The parking lot was empty, and it looked like every room was locked. They told me it was probably just a joke, but I knew it wasn't true. I was sure that what I saw was real. The man wasn't dreaming. They left, leaving me alone in the room, which made me feel tense. I never saw the man again, but I always felt like someone was watching me. In spite of all these years, I still feel like someone is watching me from outside the Riverstone Motel every time I work the night shift.